Welcome to the introductory session on AIMS within SMPTE ATC 2020. My name is Mike Cronk, Chairman of AIMS and Vice President of Advanced Technology at Grass Valley. In this session, we'll introduce you to AIMS, and hopefully this will be a helpful segment for you. So first of all, what is AIMS? Well, AIMS was formed in December of 2015 as a not-for-profit trade alliance, a 501c corporation in the United States. It's open to any company worldwide. It's funded by members, and we're united by one common goal. So what is that goal? It's to foster the adoption of one set of common ubiquitous standards-based protocols for interoperability over IP in the media entertainment industry and now more recently also in the Pro AV industry. We're united, and that unity manifests itself in what we call the AIMS roadmap. This roadmap is voted on by full voting members. Needs to be ratified, and every single one of these standards has gone through that process. Historically, we first adopted SMPTE ST 2022-6 and AS67. Those were the then prevalent uncompressed video and audio over IP standards, and we worked hand in hand, and a lot of the members participated in the SMPTE 32NF60 working group, drafting group, that drafted the SMPTE ST 2110 standard. And you'll be hearing a lot more of that in another session from the Technical Working Group Chairman of AIMS, John Mayotte, who also happens to be the person that was the editor for that drafting group. And then we've since added JT&M TR 1001-1. John will explain more about that as well. But these standards formulate the AIMS roadmap that our members have said, this is the way forward. This is a roadmap for interoperability over IP. From a membership perspective, ebbs and flows, but roughly around 90 to 100 members. And you can see there's companies worldwide. There's also not just vendors, but broadcasters, systems integrators, and other companies who benefit from having a common set of standards and open specifications for IP. So we've had about a 5-year existence coming up on that here in December, and it's been a very effective and I think helpful organization to collaborate with the other organizations and companies in the industry. So I want to get into a little bit of why AIMS, right? There's a lesson from the past. I have to go way back. I was not born in the 1800s, but back then, I've read that there were 17 different gauges of railway track, so the width between the rails. And so obviously that did not promote good interstate commerce. And so people devised solutions to kind of glue things together. They had carriages with sliding wheelbases. There were secondary undercages that could go up or down depending on which track you went to. Adding a third rail. And then another business was, hey, when this railroad gauge stops, we'll, take horse and buggy or car and transfer things over. I guess not car in 1860. The result of this, though, is that progress was impeded, that commerce couldn't happen, and that the railroad system couldn't thrive. And so Congress passed a law mandating a particular standard. And with that standard, things really took off. And so that's a lesson from way back. This particular lesson, I have to confess I was born. I do remember it. And these aren't necessarily standards, but I think they illustrate something that's key in the adoption of something, and that is that the beta and VHS tape cassette wars. Beta, by pretty much any standard, had a better quality, better chroma filtering. And so it was a great product, but in the end, you go fast forward, 5-10 years later, and VHS was the only thing you could buy. And why was that? Well, that's because it didn't have to do with the technology. It had to do with market adoption. How many vendors, how many distributors, how many consumers were buying which, and VHS won out in the market. And so it's not just enough to have an open standard or an open specification. Market adoption is important if we're going to get to the goal of fostering the adoption of open interoperability standards, which is, again, the goal of AIMS. And so what are the requirements for widespread adoption of anything, a standard or an open specification? Well, first of all, obviously it needs to be technically robust and work, but the market needs to be aware of practical implementations. Who's using it? Can it be used more widely? And then obviously the number and weight of companies adopting the standard has an effect on that adoption. And if you look at the historical, and this is just areas of focus because all different companies market, or these organizations do, but there's a lot of focus and a lot of collaboration within our community on standards. So organizations like here at SMPTE, EBU contributes, the AES and VSF and AMWA's open specifications, and the JTNM, which is comprised of 4 organizations. Those organizations really are great for the technical robustness in setting those standards. But there seemed to be a need for providing more market awareness, having companies endorse and adopt these standards, and that's really where AIMS comes in, working alongside and supporting the technical organizations. And so that's why AIMS was formed. We think it serves a purpose. It also has a number of benefits. First, to the industry would be that I think we've been able to help and be a catalyst working with the other organizations to get adoption of standards happening. I think SMPTE ST2110 is a great example of that. If you look back in 2015, there were a number of proprietary standards and vying for maybe that adoption. And SMPTE 2110 certainly has gotten some great adoption, and we're looking forward to more. But as a member of AIMS, there are also benefits. First and foremost, it's a great way for a company to come up to speed on video over IP standards for media entertainment and Pro AV. What do I mean by that? In AIMS, a lot of the contributors to the various standards, be there AMWA, SMPTE, and others, VSF, the same companies that are doing that, representatives are also typically members of AIMS. And it's a forum, especially the technical working group, to learn about what's important, what's being worked on, how can I contribute. So it's a great thing from the kind of a knowledge and technical perspective. And also, as you contribute, because there are people representing the different bodies and the companies that are working on standards collectively together, it's a real opportunity to influence direction. Not that AIMS sets the direction for any one organization, but because we're not necessarily involved in the detailed working out of a particular standard, when we get together every 2 weeks to talk about what's going on, we can have a little bit of conversation about the standards and specification, a meta conversation, what's missing, what can we need to do, and not just on the technology side, but on the marketing and the industry adoption side. And in that forum, therefore, members get to interact and contribute and participate in the direction of AIMS, which then liaison with the other key organizations in the industry, help to move the industry in a direction that makes sense for it. And so that's another great benefit. The other kind of obvious one is that within AIMS there's a number of opportunities via trade shows and virtual events, like we just ran something called IP Oktoberfest in lieu of IBC. There's opportunities to market and promote your company's products that adhere to standards and open specifications based solutions on the AIMS roadmap. It's also a very efficient way as a company to promote a standard or open specification. If your company is doing working on a standard open specification that is on the AIMS roadmap, essentially the collective power and marketing energy of these companies, we can do things jointly, we can coordinate among companies, and so to get adoption of that standard, the incremental contribution, if you will, and the marketing that AIMS does directly is funded by members' dues, but compared to an individual company's marketing budget, that's very, very small. It's a very efficient way to promote those standards and open specifications that are on the AIMS roadmap. which helps each company that is developing to those standards to get those out in the market and have more customers looking for them. So we think these are great benefits. One example of that efficient way is something that Ames has been working on for a while and introducing within the last year, IPMX. So IPMX stands for IP Media Experience, and it's targeted at the Pro AV market. And so Ames has about, well, out of that membership of roughly 90 to 100, about 25% of those companies within Ames have businesses in both Pro AV and broadcast. And Pro AV is actually a very healthy, growing market. You think of just all the people and all the ways that corporations use video as an example is exploding. And so it's a market that members care about. And so the purpose of IPMX, frankly, is like the purpose of Ames, it's defining one set of common, ubiquitous, standards-based protocols for interoperability over IP in the Pro AV industry. So it's really kind of the same thing, but targeted at Pro AV. More than that, it's based on the same standards in the Ames roadmap. So the 2110 suite of standards, both 2110-20 for uncompressed video, but ST 2110-22 for compressed video, very important with lower port speeds on some of the Ethernet switches in Pro AV, all part of the 2110 standard. They're leveraging AMWA ISO 4, ISO 5, and JT and MTR 1001-1, all on the Ames roadmap. Now with Pro AV, there's some additional requirements that aren't necessarily in broadcast. Things like the ability to do AAC audio compression, channel mapping, which actually that one is something that we're looking at for the broadcast roadmap as well. But also transporting GPIO or general purpose IO, security also common with broadcast, but maybe a greater need in Pro AV to some extent, and then copy protection, which typically is more important in Pro AV. So the working group that's working on this within Ames, those members are also in organizations working in VSF and AMWA to develop these additional specifications so that we can put them on the Ames roadmap. But on the base standards of this, there's already products supporting the base standards of IPMX. So it's an exciting time in a very efficient way. Again, if your company is interested in Pro AV and a standards-based approach, Ames is a great landing point to begin that journey. So what's next for Ames? Well, there's a lot. We need to update and enhance the roadmap. We're looking at audio mapping, things like AMWA ISO 8, security. There's an effort in AMWA called IS10 that could very well be that candidate. And then we have the extensions that I just mentioned with IPMX, things like copy protection and others. And additionally, as we look at the adoption curve, there's been quite a lot of successes with 2110. The amount of reference sites just keeps growing and growing. There's still a need to educate. There's still a need to show case studies and system references and provide more people with additional references with how to do 2110. And obviously there's a push for IPMX in the Pro AV industry. And also, a very key part of Ames is continued partnership. Ames does not do this alone. We are so honored to be working and collaborating with SMPTE and AMWA and VSF, the AES, EBU, Ultra UHD format, and IABM. There's a lot of joint things we do, like the IP showcase. There's other things that are more individual, and we're supporting on maybe a more loose way. But these organizations are fundamentally critical, and what we're trying to do is foster the adoption of the very good work that a lot of these organizations are doing. We also have media partnerships, having a marketing bent to what we do. Think great publications like the Broadcast Bridge Future, SVG, and SVG Europe. So we're really excited about what Ames has accomplished and what Ames can continue to do for the industry. And I hope you tune in to learn more about the roadmap that we have, IPMX, and other presentations. Thank you very much.